All right, so section 1.8 talks about these things called absolute value equations, and we're also going to talk about absolute value inequalities. Okay, so absolute value, it says if the absolute value of y is equal to a, then either y is a or y is negative a. So before I actually start solving the equations, I want you to think about the absolute value. Okay, so what we mean by that is if I asked you, what is the absolute value of -3? A lot of times people say, okay, I understand it's 3, you get rid of the negative. And if I were to ask you what's the absolute value of 3, sometimes people think it's going to be -3, but no, it's also +3. So I want you to think about this for a minute. When you have a negative number, think about negative as how much money you owe, and think of positive how much money you have. So I know that this is negative, right? Because there's a negative sign on the inside. So the -3 would mean I owe $3. Now the absolute value is saying, okay, I understand that you may owe, but how much do you owe? Well, you owe 3. And a +3, I would say, okay, well, that means I have $3. I understand that you have, but how much do you have? It's 3. So the absolute value is just looking for the amount, not necessarily whether it's positive or negative. How much is it, okay? And that's why the absolute value of -3 and +3 is going to be 3 in both cases. So when we have the absolute value equations, the way we're going to set these things up is we're going to do the first one to be 4x plus 2, could be 5, or 4x plus 2 could be -5. And then I'm just going to solve two individual equations. So I'm going to go -2 and -2. So 4x equals 3. Divide both sides by 4. And we get x equals 3/4. And over here, I'm going to go -2 and -2. So 4x equals -7. Divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals -7/4. And what we have here, guys, we actually have two answers. One of them is +3/4, and the other one is -7/4, okay? So let's take a look at the next one. I'm going to do this from exactly the same way I did the first one. I'm going to say 7 minus 3x is equal to 3, and 7 minus 3x is equal to -3. So let me go ahead and -7 on both sides. -3x, 3 minus 7 is a -4. Divide both sides by -3. Remember, a negative divided by another negative is a positive. It's a positive 4/3. -7 and -7. -3x equals -3 minus 7. If I owed you 3 and I borrowed another 7, now I owe you 10. Can divide both sides by -3. And again, a negative divided by another negative is a positive 10/3. And again, we have two answers, okay? All right. So let's take a look at this next one here. So again, I'm going to write it just like I did before. X plus 2 over 2 equals 7. X plus 2 over 2 equals -7. Okay. Let's multiply this guy by 2. Those will cancel out. X plus 2, 2 times 7 is 14. So -2 minus 2, x equals 12. Let's multiply this guy again by 2. That 2 will cancel out, so that gives me x plus 2. The 2 times -7, -14. -2 and -2. And I get a -16. Okay. Alrighty. So we'll do this one exactly the same way. 3 over 2x minus 1 equals 4. And 3 over 2x minus 1 equals -4. Guys, I'm going to think about this as 4 over 1. And when I have one fraction equal to another, I can cross multiply. So 3 times 1 is 3. I'm going to take 4 times all this stuff here. That's going to be an 8x minus 4. Okay, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And I get 7 equals 8x. We'll divide by 8. and x is equal to 7 over 8. We can do the same thing here. Let's cross multiply. So 3 equals, now this is a negative 4, so that's going to be a negative 8x and a positive 4, because negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. Okay, it's minus 4 on both sides. So 3 minus 4 is a minus 1, equals a negative 8x. We'll divide both sides by negative 8. And again, a negative divided by negative is a positive. Oops. So x is equal to positive 1 over 8. Okay. All right. And we have another absolute value inequality. So I want you to notice this one's slightly different. We have an expression equals another expression, but we set it up the same way. So we're going to go x plus 1 equals 1 minus 3x. And then x plus 1 equals the negative, and I'm going to put this in parentheses, of 1 minus 3x. Okay, so one of them was positive, one is negative. Now remember, I'm trying to get all my x's together. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3x to both sides. That's 4x plus 1 equals 1. So I'll subtract 1 on both sides. So 4x equals 0. So now I divide by 4, we get x equals 0. Perfect. Okay, there's my first answer. This one over here, x plus 1 equals, let's distribute that negative 1, a negative 1 and a plus 3x. So if I say minus 3x on both sides, let's see, 1 minus 3x is a negative 2x plus 1 equals negative 1. Minus 1 on both sides, negative 2x equals negative 2. So divide both sides by negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1. And again, we got our two answers, right? One is 0 and one is 1. Okay. All right, so we have another one similar. We'll do it exactly the same way. So let's see, 3 minus 2x equals 5 minus 2x. And 3 minus 2x equals negative 5 minus 2x. Okay, so I want you to notice something here. When I add 2x to both sides, those are going to cancel, those are going to cancel. I'm going to end up with 3 equals 5, which isn't true, right? So for this part here, guys, I actually don't have a solution for it, okay? Doesn't mean I don't have a solution to the entire problem. That part doesn't have a solution. So let's try the next one. So 3 minus 2x. Let's think of that negative 1, right? Oh, come on, my pen froze again. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. To unfreeze. So negative 1 times 5 is a negative 5. A negative 1 times a negative 2x is a positive 2x. Okay. So let me add 2x on both sides. 3 equals, those cancel, negative 5 plus 4x. So we'll add 5 to both sides. 8 equals 4x. And when we divide by 4, we just get x equals 2. So this one here, guys, only has one solution. And that solution, that answer is x is equal to 2. All right. So now, I'm going to scroll down to the next part. And we have what's called absolute value inequalities, okay? So in doing absolute value inequalities, guys, I want you to notice I have two formulas here. I have formula number 1 and I have formula number 2. And I'm going to solve these and I'm going to figure out, the way I'm going to solve them is I'm going to do a little stare and compare and figure out, let me write that up here, stare and compare. Okay. So it says solve each absolute value inequality and write the answer using interval notation. Okay. So what I mean by that is I want you to look at this piece right here. I would use formula number 1 because it's set up in that same way. And in this case, I would say my letter A is going to be my number 3 and my letter Y is going to be all this business right here. So the first thing I'm going to write is a negative 3 is less than 2x plus 5, which is less than 3. And we solved these three-part inequalities earlier in section 1.7. So now I'm just going to go minus 5, minus 5, minus 5. That's going to leave me with a negative 8 is less than 2x, which is less than 3 minus 5 is a minus 2. Now, I want you to notice what I'm dividing by. I'm dividing by a positive 2. My inequality sign is not going to change because I divided by a positive 2. Okay? So let's draw our number line. Okay, remember, negative infinity here, positive infinity there. The two numbers are negative 4 and 1. Okay. My x is in the middle, shading in the middle. In an interval form, I'm going to go negative 4 to 1, using parentheses because those circles are not filled in. Okay. Then when I look at my next problem, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to this part here and I'm going to say, would I use number 1 or number 2? We would use number 2. Okay. And where my a is kind of like my 3 and my y is my 2x plus 5. So look at the first part. It says y, which in this case was 2x plus 5, is less than, in this case, negative a or negative 3. And then it has the word or. 2x plus 5 is bigger than or equal to positive 3. Okay. And so now I'm going to go ahead and start solving it. So let's go minus 5 and minus 5. So that's 2x minus 8 divided by 2. X is less than negative 4. Oh, it was equal to also. Sorry about that. Let's put my little equals to's. Okay. Minus 5 minus 5. 2x is, let's see, bigger than or equal to negative 2. Divide by 2 divided by 2. X is bigger than or equal to negative 1. Okay. I'm going to move over to the side, guys, because I'm kind of running out of room here. Okay. So I'm going to draw my number line right here. The two numbers I'm going to put are negative 1 and, negative 4 and negative 1. So let's make this a negative 4 and then a negative 1. That's how they would appear on my number line. Notice I have the little equal to's. So I'm going to fill them in. Look at the way the arrow is drawn here. X is smaller than negative 4. That would be numbers this way. Remember, here's my negative infinity, my positive infinity. X is bigger than negative 1. Okay? So now, when I write my answer in interval form or interval notation, I'm going to go from negative infinity to negative 4, bracket, because the circles are filled in. I'm going to start up again at negative 1 to infinity. And if you remember, we're going to put the u because we're connecting those two pieces, right? It's all about you. Alrighty. Okay, so now when I get to the third problem, I want you to look at the third problem right here. And I want to say, okay, would I compare that more to the first one I did or the second one? And I would say, oh, that's more like the first one because look at the inequality. Okay. So I'm going to go negative 1 is less than 3/5 plus x, which is less than 1. So negative 1 is less than 3/5 plus x is less than 1. Okay, so if you don't like working with fractions, we can say, let's do this. Let's think about that over 1, that over 1, that over 1. Let's multiply everything by 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So look, 5 times 1, 5. I don't need to put it over 1, right? 5 times x, 5x. This 5 here and that 5 cancel, so that leaves a 3. 5 times negative 1, negative 5. And you don't have to mess with any fractions for right now. Okay. And then we can say, well, look, let's just keep going. Let's go minus 3, minus 3, minus 3. So negative 8 is less than 5x, is less than 2. Now I can divide everything by 5. And I end up with negative 8 over 5 with an x, less than 2 over 5. Okay. I'm going to draw my number line right here. Negative, there we go. negative infinity and infinity. The two numbers are negative 8/5 and 2/5. My circles are staying open because I don't have the little lines. My x is in the middle, so I'm shading in the middle. And because I'm not filling in those circles, we're going to use parentheses, negative 8/5 to 2/5. Okay. All right. So the next problem, we might be tempted to say, okay, what formula do we use? Formula 1, Formula 2. Before we start with Formula 1, Formula 2, the first thing I'm going to do is this. Okay. Now I can come back and scroll and say, okay, let's look at that, and let's look at Formula 1, Formula 2. And in case you're wondering, let me clean it up a little bit. Here we go. Formula 1, Formula 2, it looks like we're going to go Formula 2, right? So look what it says. Y is less than negative A, or Y is bigger than positive A. Okay, so I'm going to say x plus 1 is less than negative 2, or x plus 1 is greater than positive 2. So minus 1, x is smaller than negative 3, minus 1, x is bigger than 1, okay, or, so let me just move on over to the side a little bit. Let's move this way a little bit. There we go. We don't need to move too much. Let me draw my number line. It's right there. Here's my negative infinity, my positive infinity. Here's my negative 3. Here's my positive 1. Okay, I'm going to leave those circles open. Now look at this part. X is smaller than negative 3. Shade to the left. X is bigger than positive 1. Shade to the right. Okay. Now, what's the next thing I want to do? I'm going to write my answer in a novel form. Negative infinity to negative 3 with a parenthesis. 1 to infinity with a parenthesis. And connect them with a U. Okay. And so for the next problem that I have here, we're going to use formula number 1, right? So I'm going to go negative 4 is less than or equal to 7 minus 3x, which is less than or equal to positive 4. So let's go minus 7, minus 7, negative 11, less than or equal to negative 3x, which is less than or equal to negative 3. Now we are dividing everything by negative 3, right? Okay, so a negative divided by negative is a positive 11/3. Since we're dividing by a negative, that's going to flip over. X, we're dividing by a negative, that's going to flip over. Negative 3 over negative 3 is a positive 1. Okay. Now, guys, I want you to think about this for a minute. Imagine I could pick this up, take it out of the computer screen, and flip it around. Wouldn't it look like that? If I were to sort of pick it up, take it out, flip it over? Yes, it would. The reason why I want to do that is when I draw my number line and I put my numbers down, 1 needs to come first because that's the order it appears on the number line, right? You say, how do I know that? Well, look, what's 11 divided by 3? 11 divided by 3 would be 3 2/3, right? And I know that 3 2/3 is bigger than 1. Okay. So next thing, should we fill in the circles? Yes, we should. Where's the x? It's in between those two numbers. So I'm going to fill in between those two numbers. In an interval notation, it's going to look like that. And that, my friends, was section 1.8.